Welcome, everyone. We're so excited you're here. We have Professor Stephen Chininis here, and he will be doing a fantastic talk with you. Dr. Chininis, or Professor Chininis, is a professor of practice in the School of Industrial Design at Georgia Tech and the principal of Chininis Product Development Group. He specializes in the integration of invention, innovation, and an entrepreneurial spirit in the work he does and design students he teaches. And so I'm going to ask him to take it away as he talks a lot about innovation and entrepreneurship, and we can't wait to get started.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out. It's great, or staying in, actually. But I can't wait to tell you a little bit about industrial design, which is the field that I am in, which is very closely related to engineering, but it's not the exact same thing. And also to tell you a little bit about design thinking and customer discovery and all the entrepreneurship initiatives that we have on the campus of Georgia Tech. There's a bunch of them, and you may not get involved in your first year or your second year, but maybe your third or fourth, and we've got students who start right away and have startups before they leave Georgia Tech. Right now I'm involved in a program at Georgia Tech called CreateX. I'm one of the coaches, and we have about 70 teams of students. The teams can be anywhere from 1 student to maybe 5, I think is our biggest. And they're all working on startup ideas to develop companies to solve problems that they've identified and are working on. This is one of the main initiatives at Georgia Tech, and we really love this. I really love this part of it because it's so freeing in terms of like you getting to work on the things you really are passionate about and the things that you love. I'm going to start my presentation by talking about, I forgot to mention, most of what I've designed is toys. So I've designed hundreds and hundreds of toys over the years. Maybe it's close to 300 and a bunch of other stuff too. But when I say I design toys, everybody says, oh yeah, what toy? So you've probably played with some of the toys I've designed, but you were probably an infant when you did, because many of the toys are for juvenile products. But feel free to go to chininisdesign.com and check out my website and see the stuff I've designed. I didn't want this to be about my stuff, but there's a little bit in the presentation, but you'll see. So let me go ahead and turn on the presentation. Share my screen. There we go. Could somebody just tell me for sure if my screen is being shared?
Yes, it is.
Great, thanks. It's always nice to know it's working. Okay, so this is, I'm starting out by calling this Design Thinking 101. And so design thinking is a term that's gotten to be really, really popular in the circles of startup circles and other places where people are trying to be innovative. Of course, I've never met anybody who said they didn't want to be innovative. So it's it goes a little deeper than that. We have to talk about how you can be innovative and what things help you to get there. So design thinking is just simply a catch-all word, a phrase to sort of describe thinking that's just a little bit different in terms of how the thought process works. Let's see. For some reason my slides are not advancing. Hold on a second here. There we go. And I went too many. But what is design thinking? Well, there's regular thinking, which I think everybody's kind of familiar with, right? So you say, okay, here's a problem. I found a problem. Let's see if we can solve the problem. And you work a little bit on the problem, and you think, okay, well, this is the obvious solution. I think I can just fix this. And of course, my idea about how to solve the problem is the best in the world because I'm smart. We all are. And you build it. You realize it's going to take you a long time to do the project or to finish the project, but you just go right ahead and you're not afraid of work, so you just keep working and you get to the end of it and you find out one of two things: you've either solved the problem or you haven't. if you have a failure, it's a big failure because you spent a lot of time doing it. So design thinking is different because we do this process. The easiest way to sort of describe it is we diverge and then we converge. Diverge is just simply having a lot of ideas, right? So it's no more complicated than that. And so you try and have as many ideas as you possibly can. You try and evaluate the ideas in a fair, non-biased way, and then you try and figure out which of those ideas or which combination of those ideas can bring you to the result that you really need and want, that fits your criteria the best. So in order to do all this, though, in order to diverge, in other words, have lots of ideas, there's some work you have to do. You have to figure out how to diverge. And a lot of people, when we talk about diverging, what we're talking about is coming up with ideas that are both interesting, stupid, crazy, serious, all that range of things that you can think of to solve a problem. So, you start out with, okay, I've got a problem, I'm going to solve it. But the steps that are different are, the first step is I'm going to try and understand the problem better. So is the problem I think I have the real problem I have? And I don't know that because I haven't talked to the people that I think that have the problem. And I haven't actually spent time with them and understood them and empathized with them. We use the word empathy a lot because it's a great word to describe exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to sort of role play and be part of that experience that the user of the product would have to go through. And if we can see it from their point of view, then we can understand the problem better. And it does this other magical thing, which is helps us to sort of tamper down our own ego and our own bias a little bit. About what we think the solution should be. We all have this sort of run with it, I have got the solution, I'm the smartest one in the room kind of bias, and we've got to be careful that we don't do that because we may be running into a direction that the user or the person with the problem actually doesn't even want. So that empathy part is very important. And then there's a couple of other parts that are important. One is that we have to figure out a way to talk about the concepts, like how to compare them and stuff. And the best way to do that is to show them, to represent them. And you can't represent them with words because it's not an efficient way. We'll do a little exercise later that will make that point. Then you do this sort of thing where you put the concepts in competition with each other. So your ideas are competing, and that also helps with not being biased because they're all your ideas, or at least you had a little part in all of them, and so you can compare them fairly. We do another thing that's very important is that we test our assumptions. We make little models quickly. We see if they'll fail. We fool around with paper and wood and before we get to making things out of metal, if it's a metal product or whatever. So we do low cost, fast prototyping. And that also applies to digital products. So if you're talking about like, I'm going to test my app. We have a lot of CreateX folks working on apps, but you want to test your app, you don't make the whole app. You don't do all the things. What you can do is just make some screens and you can walk someone through it or make a video. And it's all can be done in sort of a fake way, but you get the feeling and you get the feedback, more importantly, from the person about whether they like it or whether they think it works correctly or whether it's too far to reach for this button or I didn't know if I pressed that button or not because there was no feedback and all those kinds of digital things that we get into. Then we take that information, we refine it, and we keep going, and we sort of start the cycle back over a few times. So that's the design thinking like umbrella idea of what it is. So I was talking about all these tools, or we're trying to empathize, and we have a bunch of tools that we use to find ways to empathize with people. And I won't go into all of them because it's kind of dense. And some of them are more helpful than others, and some of them are helpful in certain situations and not others. So it's better if you just sort of understand that that there are a bunch of different kinds of tools, but I will talk about a couple. And the ones that seem to bubble up to the surface and everybody wants to talk about all the time, there's a common term called customer discovery. And customer discovery is what startups use to describe the action that they need to take to find out, should the app do this or should the app do that, right? And so that's pretty easy to understand. So you go out and you talk to a bunch of customers, and you could do this by doing a survey. You could do it by doing like phone calls. You could do it by standing in a park somewhere in the old days. Remember when we used to do that and talk to other people? And so you could do that. And then, you would get some information if you ask the right questions. And so customer discovery is a great idea, but sometimes we don't do it correctly. We have groups at Georgia Tech right now doing it incorrectly, and we're trying to get them to correct it. And the other thing that happens with customer discovery is you'll notice the word customer. Sometimes you're solving a problem for someone who's not a customer. You're trying to solve a problem to do good, for instance, like to go out in the world and do a project that allows people to have clean water in a place they can't have clean water. So it may not be customers the right word for that. It's maybe a user or somebody who's we use the term stakeholder all the time because there's lots of different people. Like if you're designing a product for a child, for instance, sure, you're designing it for the child specifically, right? But the parent is a stakeholder, and the child actually doesn't get the toy unless the parent's okay with it, right? So you have to be conscious of the other people involved in the purchasing process. So customer is not the right word. But so instead, a better form of customer discovery, or the one we kind of push our students to, is something called journey mapping. Journey mapping is this marvelous tool where it's nothing more than following somebody around and trying to understand their journey. And what you do in that process is you look for something we call pain points. Pain points are, or we also call them friction. So it's anything that happens in the process of doing something that somebody doesn't like, or causes a problem, or makes something not go as smoothly as you'd like. And if you're talking about somebody who has a website, friction is anything that prevents somebody from clicking buy, right? Or it could be, people aren't using rapid transit because there's a friction point that you can't figure out, and you do a study and you find out that the way that you have to get on the train is a little scary for older people, and therefore lots of a certain generation aren't riding the train. Because it's scary, or something you find things that you can't predict. You find things that you aren't aware of, and those are interesting things because those we call insight, and insight is exactly the thing that we want to use to help us solve the problem. Right? Okay, so let's talk about journey mapping a little more in depth. There we go. So I have some examples of student journey mapping, and I'm going to bring one of them up so you can kind of see what it looks like. Okay, here it is. So journey mapping is, in this situation, was to find out a little bit about what it's like to buy a cup of coffee. That's all this was about. So it could be that the person, the problem you're trying to solve is maybe there's somebody who wants to start a coffee company nearby and doesn't know really about what happens and doesn't know about their competitors and things like that. So they want to sort of sneak around the neighborhood and find out about all the other possible ways of buying coffee in the neighborhood. And so you go out and you do, in this case, they developed a persona because they wanted to target the solution to this person, this kind of person. I won't go into the details, but they figured out a person that they were aiming for. And then they tried to explain what they were doing with the experiment. They talked about the locations they were going to go to. And they began by putting someone in a place and then observing the situation. And so here's ABC of what's happening during the process. So somebody's getting some coffee. They have, you go through everything from getting out of your car to drinking the coffee. So it includes figuring out what to order. It includes how long the line was. It includes all those other kind of details. And whether it was easy or hard to pay for it, things like that. Here's another. This is a female in the gas station, same situation. Observations are being made. I won't go into a lot of detail here because I just kind of want you to get an understanding of like what kinds of things we do, what kinds of studies we do, and what they look like. This was I should explain to you, this was a 2-day thing. This is not like a 4-week study. We sent a bunch of people out and they found out information and we were able to then synthesize the information. This is a Chick-fil-A experience. So somebody went into Chick-fil-A and ordered coffee, and this is the experience they had. Male and female, because we want to get kind of both points of view to see if there was any difference. We went through a bunch of pros and cons. It was a friendly environment, and they didn't want to serve the customer, however, in this situation because they don't brew new coffee after 8 o'clock, which was kind of interesting. So they found out something they didn't know, right? Okay, and here's McDonald's. They had a kiosk. He ordered the coffee. There's pros and cons involved in that. And then the design process begins, armed with all this information. And they are speculating here on ways that they could figure out how to improve the design of the product. These are all just speculations. This isn't actual concepts. These are just notions of what you might be looking to solve based on your insight. And they liked, of all of them, they liked Chick-fil-A the best, and they wanted to make sure that that everybody knew that. So let me get back to my other presentation. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that for the wait. Okay, so there you go. Great. So the purpose of all the tools that we're talking about are to find insight, and because you found insight, that then gives you some opportunity about how to solve the problem. So the problem now is that you have to creatively synthesize all that information and come up with a bunch of concepts. This is significantly different than just coming up with one concept and working on it. That's the whole point. So the things that you're trying to look at when you're trying to analyze the data are the research you've done, the different kinds of research you may have done. There's 2 basic kinds of research that that you should kind of be at least a little bit aware of, and that is that there's quantitative data that you can gather, and there's qualitative data. And it's pretty easy to understand which is which. Quantitative means a bunch of numbers, right? So that's a survey where you've got a whole bunch of people responding to what you're doing and giving you some information. It's not detailed information. It can never be too detailed because people don't like to fill out big, long, I mean, I'm sure you don't, right? They don't like to fill out big, long surveys, but you might get them for a few minutes, and they might give you some good information. And you can get a lot of people. The other one is qualitative, which is a deep dive with somebody who knows a lot about it, and you have a nice long discussion with them. And in general, for design purposes, qualitative information is usually more valuable, because you could get insight from just one person that could change the whole direction of your project. You can validate it later with testing and with additional surveys and things like that, but it could set you in a new direction. And you're not really looking for like the only answer. You're looking for as many possible solutions as you can find. So you're looking for this at the same time. As I mentioned before, you're trying to eliminate your own personal bias about what the answer is. This is counterintuitive to all of us. We don't like thinking that our idea might not be the best one, but you have to sort of set it aside. And I'll tell you a little trick. If you've got enough concepts in front of you that you've generated, you're less likely to zero in on one of them as your favorite. And that's good. That's a good thing for the design process. So just a quick review of what I was already saying. And that is that first you research and identify the problem. Then you talk to users. You find insight. Then you represent your ideas. We'll get a little more into this in a second. You creatively reframe what you know. So you think about it all over again and say, well, is that what really the problem we're trying to solve? And if we do what we think we wanted to do, is that going to solve the problem? You develop concepts and prototypes. You test them. You iterate. You evaluate. So you're critical, and you do that over and over again. And you do it in the leanest possible way. And what I mean by that is you don't build something made out of cement. You make it out of paper, and you test what you can. If you need to test strength and you really need to make it out of cement, then you don't make it in the form it's going to end up in. You do a test fixture, or you do something really simple that'll get you the information you need without spending a lot of time, right? So maybe you prefer looking at this in terms of charts, so I can do that too. There's a lot of charts that have to do with design thinking. So here's one. It's called the classic double diamond, right? And so when I was talking about diverge, this is diverging. The first triangle, you spread out, and then you critique. You say, okay, which of those is our best idea? And so then you converge and you diverge. You're going down to one, and then you go back and you converge again. I mean, you diverge again, and then you converge again. So you do it as many times as is necessary to get the solutions you need. This is the new double diamond, which is slightly different. Again, if you need this information, you want this information, we can make sure you get it, or you can look it up. There's so much information about design thinking out there that it's actually kind of overwhelming. This is somebody who made it into a circle, but here's my point. Even if you have all the sticky notes in the world, I mean, you have all these ideas, you've come up with all these possible solutions, had lots of arguments with your peers about how to solve a problem. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a good result. You might still get this instead of this, right? It could be a big flop. And why is that, right? So it turns out you actually need a few other things to do the kind of thing you need, we're trying to do design thinking correctly. This is my personal opinion about it, but I think that you absolutely need curiosity. If you're starting the project without curiosity, find a different project, please, because you need to be willing to get as deep into the project as you possibly can, and talk about the minutia of the project, which, let's face it, like a lot of people wouldn't do that for a lot of projects, but if it's important to you, you will. You need creativity, and you need passion. Of the three of these, I want to mostly talk about creativity, because there's nothing I can do to make you more passionate except what I spend a lot of time at Georgia Tech doing is being a cheerleader, because I just go around telling people that you can do this. It's like, we can figure this out. There is a way. And even if it's never been done before, it's okay. But let's think about it and find a way. So I can be a cheerleader, but if you're not approaching it in a creative way, then you may miss some of the insights. You may put things together in the wrong way. You may not come up with the right solution. So creativity in design is the ability to synthesize interesting and important information and make it, form it, mold it into amazing, helpful ideas. And then taking those ideas and making them into actual things, products, digital products, whatever. And so it's kind of like seeing what others don't see, because you're looking in detail at a whole series of data that kind of comes to you. And also you're willing to make creative jumps about how to solve a problem that you wouldn't do if you were just, sort of like adding up the numbers, right? It's not about adding up the data and saying, oh, this is the answer because 14 people say this and 12 people say that. It's not quite that simple. It's much more complex. In fact, there's so many variables that it makes this whole thing very hard, because you're juggling a lot of things at the same time. You're trying to weigh the different elements of the design process and figure out, well, should I make it out of metal or should I make it out of wood? And if I do this, then this happens. And if I do this, this happens. And so that's why we have this model of putting things out in front of everyone, communicating with the world what we're trying to do with actual, like things, actual concepts. So I had in mind here a slight intermission, because that's a lot of talking from me and not a lot of questions from you. And so before we get into the next part of it, which is all about creativity, I wanted to sort of ask you if you have any specific questions about the idea of design thinking and how it works, and how you can apply it to just about anything. No questions? I can't read all of them. So.
We can elevate anyone who wants to actually speak instead of typing. And so you can just put me or your name in the chat, and we can elevate you if you wish to talk instead of actually typing out your response.
Meanwhile, if anybody wants to make a quick run to get a drink or something, this is the right time, because I'm going to pause for just another second here before we get into the next part.
So we have a question that's been out on a poll, Professor Chininis. I wondered if you wanted to share your answer with us, though. So we asked the poll question of what have you been impressed with the innovation in the last few months, so post COVID-19. So answers include point of sale, like how you pay at the store, food delivery or food service, how you get the food at a restaurant, new methods of entertainment, like free concert TV, or new methods, new ways of waiting in line. Like, what have you been impressed with design-wise or innovation-wise in the past few months?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's very topical, and everybody, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but the world changed. And I'm old enough that the world has changed many times. But sometimes you're aware of the change and sometimes you're not. When the iPhone came out, for instance, people weren't really aware that the world was changing, but it was. And it changed because of the iPhone. And so anyways, so things I've seen recently, there's a lot of discussion about like how can we go back to work and how can we do it safely, and there's a lot of people trying to achieve some things that I think are really would be really essential. There's work being done. I don't know that anybody has completed anything that is amazing yet, but I know that there's people working on amazing things. One of the things I just saw the other day was a mask that was completely transparent, and they came up with a way of filtering air using some very simple devices and things. And the idea is that wearing a mask, the problem with wearing a mask is an emotional problem, because you lose a sense of being able to recognize someone and understand exactly what they're expressing to you. Because of course you can express certain things with the eyes, but it turns out the rest of the face is really important too. And the subtleties of how we feel and what's going on, especially in places like in a ICU, is very it's very difficult to tell what's going on. So if you can kind of imagine yourself being in a bed and having someone talking to you, the only emotional connection you get is from someone who you can't even see their mouth, and that's tough. That's really tough. And so the people who are working on solving that problem, I give them a lot of credit, and I'm wishing them well. I've tried a few ideas myself, but haven't come up with anything that I think really solves it. There's some other, kind of cute things like things that grab doors with and things like that. And I think to a certain degree, those are good solutions. But the other thing that's happening, especially with COVID-19, is we're designing things while we're standing on quicksand. Or another way of saying it is we're trying to build the plane while we're flying it. And the problem is that the rules keep changing, right? So when COVID-19 first came out, everybody said, don't wear masks, because there was a reason. It wasn't that we shouldn't wear masks. It was because we didn't have enough masks to make sure that we had plenty for our healthcare workers. And so, but then things changed. Now it was, okay, wear a mask. Wearing a mask is a good idea. The supply is better, and it will help us with the problem. And so a number of other things have changed as well, like touching surfaces. And it turns out that you can't catch COVID-19 as easily from a surface as you can from atomized infectant in the air. So being in an enclosed room is worse than being outdoors and other things. So as our knowledge becomes more complete about it, I think we're going to get better and better products. I can't mention, I can't talk about like innovation without mentioning the thing that got everyone's attention last year before COVID, and everybody was discussing, and that is the Cybertruck. I mean, I love the fact that everybody is arguing about whether or not that's good or bad. I love it. I mean, it means that people are actually paying attention to the design. And whether you like it or don't, it doesn't even matter. I'd love to have an argument with anybody about, why it's good or why it's bad, or, and so, but the intellectualization of design is really, really important. And so I'll give you my personal opinion of the Cybertruck at the end if you want, but for now we'll just leave it there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back to the presentation. We talked about concepts, right? And I think, yeah, I still have it up. Okay, so I put up, we were talking about how to represent ideas. And I'm going to show you my favorite way. This is a series of concepts that I had to do a bunch of years ago. They're all old ideas, so you can steal them if you want. But the idea is pretty simple. You know that all these concepts have to do with a particular company that had a solar panel, and they were trying to figure out things they could do with it. And it's a very small solar panel, so you can't do much. And back then, you couldn't generate much power from a solar panel. You can do better now. So anyways, I want you to understand that these are all ideas that are based on the same design brief, the same understanding of like what we're trying to solve. And so there you go. So the first one was a flashlight. Obviously, you can also take the top off and it can be a fan. This is a birdhouse that the bottom lights up because of solar power. This is an alarm clock that if during the day it generates air that fills up a balloon. When the alarm goes off, it's because the balloon is collapsing and making a ridiculously obnoxious noise. Here's a fish tank that we're trying to use solar power for the aeration. Now, I want to point out that some of these ideas may not work. This could be a really dumb idea. You don't really want to put your fish near a window, but it would increase the temperature of their water, and it might not be a good thing. But it could be that it leads you to something more interesting. So we went ahead and represented even bad ideas. And here's another, just the rainforest kind of a thing. And here's another a light show. So just based on all these different ideas, you end up with enough ideas on a wall. Now, if you could see all these at the same time, which is what I'm talking about, which is why I don't like slide presentation, because you can only see one image at a time. The idea would be that you can look at those ideas on a wall. We can have an argument about what the best one is. You can decide that you really want to combine two of them, and you can have a really meaningful discussion about where to go. Now, but that all I wanted to show you by that is just kind of showing you the idea behind putting a bunch of concepts up. Okay, so let's get back to where we were before. Hold on a second. I got to bring this over to the other screen again. Here we go. So let's talk about creativity in general. Because as you remember, a minute ago, I was talking to you about curiosity, passion, and creativity, right? And those are like essential elements so design thinking is great. I mean, it's great. It's a framework, right, that you can build around, but it doesn't give you the answer. So what can you do to be more creative? Well, you can try and be more like me. And that's a joke, honestly, but it kind of leads to like what makes me like I am, which is I'm curious. So you could have 47 things. So we can give you a list of 47 things that you can boost your creativity. Or you guys probably would recognize this better, right? 47 mind-blowing boosters. This is how information is presented these days. So I'm sorry, but there's no recipes or formulas to guarantee creativity. There are frameworks for design thinking, but that's not the same thing. I'm talking about a recipe for creativity. So there are some people, you can go out on the internet and you can find people who can talk about how you can be more creative. They don't know what they're talking about. It's impossible to say what, because we're all individuals, we're all different. So what makes you more creative than me, I don't know. But I can give you some hints. So this is a recipe. This is a great recipe. This is the best recipe my family has. This is my grandmother, who is from Greece. This is the thing she brought over from the old country, as we call it. And it allowed my mother and now my sister to make the best Greek pastry in the world, honestly. So it's a recipe for something called galeta burico. See if you can say that 3 times. It's delicious. It's wonderful. But you got to understand something. Following a recipe will make exactly what you made before. That's the point. So if you're saying that you want a recipe for creativity, it's an oxymoron. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. How could you do that? Oops. I mean, think about it. How could you say to somebody, I want you to follow the rules so you can break the rules? You got to be innovative. Being innovative or coming up with creativity or whatever word you want to use, it's about breaking the rules. And so if somebody's written it all down for you, you're just going to get to where they got to. You're not going to get past that. I think that clarifies it pretty good. But there's nothing wrong with following the rules because you get great Greek pastry. And obviously I've been eating a lot of it. And there are times when you don't want people to be creative. So if you're trying to figure out the exact form and shape of a wing for an airplane to be designed in a way that it's lightweight but it won't break, I don't want you to be creative. I want you to pay attention to getting that information dialed in there so that I can feel confident when I get on a plane. I don't want a brain surgeon to all of a sudden, well, I don't think it's a brain surgery in that picture, but I don't want a brain surgeon to all of a sudden say, I wonder what happens if I do this. Not a good time to be creative, right? But there are lots of times when you want creativity. So you got to know the difference. You got to point out. So in any project, right? Even if it's a hugely innovative project, you can be innovative for a long time, but you get to a certain point when you have to execute it, and then you have to get serious about it. Like you have to talk to people who are going to manufacture it or write the code. And at that point in time, you can't be creative anymore. You have to stop being creative. You have to execute, right? So that's an important distinction I want you to remember. So you can't just attack a problem and go like think. That doesn't work for being creative. It helps to talk about, so you can't force yourself to be creative, but we can talk about what makes it so you're not creative, right? So you tell me, I'm not creative when what? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'd love it if you would just kind of on your own think about this for a minute and make a list of things that you know prevent you from being creative. Pretty easy list. TV is one of them. But then you can also make another list. I'm creative when what? When what happens? So here's my list of creativity enablers. Do something. If that didn't work, do something else. I mean it. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect to be creative. So what kinds of things do I mean? Exercise, sleep, take a shower, sing a song, call your mom, which is always a good idea. Get in touch with your subconscious. Everybody knows what that is, right? It's that thing that's going on back in the background somewhere. That's where creativity is. That's where it comes from. It's making connections of things that don't seem to make sense at the moment, but somewhere along the line they do kind of come together. Creativity doesn't ever walk. It hasn't ever for me. It doesn't walk in through the front door. You see it with your peripheral vision. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. And you collect it. And if you collect enough of it, then all of a sudden you see how they connect. Take a different point of view. So if you were looking at a problem and it was a child's toy, look at the parent's point of view. User versus consumer, on and on and on, male versus female. So there's lots of different techniques that you can use to jump into somebody else's body and think about a project. Find a quiet place, spend 15 minutes in that quiet place, removing blockers, right? And those, what are the blockers? Put your phone somewhere else. Go ahead and make the list of all the things you need to do so you don't have to think about those things anymore. And just stay in the room and just wait and just relax and daydream and think about the problem and daydream some more. Put on some great music. Close your eyes. Don't go to sleep. Daydream. Draw. Dance. Give yourself permission to be curious. Play. How about role play? Go through the motions. Meditate. That's a great way to calm your mind and think of other things. Notice the world around you. Laugh or cry. Find a way to do either of those two things, and you're in touch with your subconscious. Oops. There we go. Press the wrong button. Be critical. Be sarcastic. It's okay. Sarcasm is really a good tool. Joke around. Humor is a great tool. Let nature inspire you. Nature. So here's a few examples of pictures I took when I was in the Galapagos Islands in early February. Let's just let this inspire us for a moment. I love that photo. So let nature inspire you, but not just nature. Yeah.
Whenever you have a second, we have some questions rolling in.
Oh, okay. So I'm wrapping up right now.
Perfect.
You can also let other people's work inspire you. I'll go through these quickly too. This is a dark masterpiece and a bright one, both equally inspiring. Relentlessly ask yourself, what is the real problem and why are we trying to solve it? And if you do that, you're going to get to something good. Okay, I think at that point, I think that's the end. Oh, I have a bunch of quotes, but you don't need to read these. I'll just jump to the last one, which is creativity is intelligence having fun. And if you don't get that, then you probably won't be creative. So just try and have fun. And by the way, Albert Einstein said that, so he would know. Okay, so if we want to do questions, we can do that now.
Perfect. We actually have a live question. Oh, sorry, Risha. We have a live question from Sandro. If you want to unmute yourself, Sandro, you can ask your question.
Hey, hello, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm an incoming freshman from Peru in South America, and I'm currently working on a startup that I built with like a friend here and a web developer. And we are currently working on a web page through a web page because it's our MVP. The whole startup is to try to work against the wave of unemployment that is hitting Peru right now. So we're trying to give work to technicians and like electricians, carpenters, plumbers through this web page and trying to amplify their networking. But how would you like recommend me to make the prototype of an app without an app developer? Because we don't have an app developer in the team, and making an app is really expensive right now. But we want to start prototyping the app because working through the web page is not the ideal way we want to work, and it's not the way we're looking forward to be working on.
Right. So, I mean, you could actually talk to me offline if you want. I think my information is pretty readily available. You can just go to the Georgia Tech website and get my email. And I'm happy to like get into detail with you about what you can do. In general, there's a number of tools that you can use that are like app creation tools that are pretty much drag and drop kind of things where you're just trying to graphically represent what could happen. And so you would build some sort of framework about how you want the architecture to work, and then you'd plop in representative images and then you'd be able to go from one to the other on an actual phone. And that would give you the opportunity to get someone to use it and understand it and see if you think they're using it the way you want them to, or if it's actually solving the problem that they have. And so that's what I would recommend. But yeah, feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to give you like names of particular apps or whatever. But I mean, tools that you can use to make apps.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I'll contact you through email then.
Great. So I just put over on the screen. So I told you I was a toy designer, but recently I've been pivoting to through the pandemic. I've been manufacturing face shields in my garage. That's just something that happened to happen because I had the tools here, and I knew that I could solve some problems and help people. And so I just started manufacturing stuff for friends that were in the medical industry, and so sometimes pivoting is really a blast and fun, and also meaningful because you get to do something that, in a very small way, can change the world, which I think we're all interested in doing. These are some of the people that I've helped. Actual pictures of people in ICUs that are wearing the masks that I designed. And one good solution often leads you to a whole bunch of other projects. Like the one in the middle here is somebody saw one of my face shields and said, I wish I could use it, but I'm a dentist and I have to wear these things under my, and it's the shield would hit it. And so I said, well, I'll be happy to solve that problem for you. So we spent about 3 days trying to figure out how to solve the problem, and we did. And so I started manufacturing a version just for dentists. I'm reading some of the questions.
Yes, there was another one from Joey. He was asking, do you have any creative ideas in terms of how can an undergraduate student who's not as well versed in their major as yet, how they can actually work on new ideas as well? I know you went a little bit in that in your presentation.
Yeah, so I mean, you're at an amazing school because Georgia Tech really nurtures and finds ways of allowing everybody on campus to jump into doing creative problem solving and coming up with startups. And so hopefully you'll be able to engage with other people who have like mind, and you'll be able to come up with things that you can work on as a group. And maybe you don't have the expertise that you need to solve a particular app problem, but you're going to be down the hall in your dorm or somewhere in the nearby is going to be somebody who doesn't do what you do but would love to write code. So it's really a great opportunity to sort of like make friends and build teams of different abilities. And so if you have a group of people and they're all the same, like if a group of 3 industrial designers, it would be pretty dumb because you're just going to trip over each other because you all have the same experience and expertise. And it works much better if you have a team that's a mechanical engineer, maybe biomed, and an industrial designer on a team, and you can create and develop the things that are interesting to all 3 of you. So I think that's the way to do it, is to find people that you can work with that will help you. Obviously, we have lots of programs at Georgia Tech to help get you involved with other people. CreateX has regular meetings where people just show up and talk about ideas and and try and find other people who might want to work on the idea with them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm looking out to see if there's any more questions. We'll send out your contact information to Sandro as you talked about. But thank you so much for just being a source of a wealth of knowledge, really, for all things innovation and entrepreneurship at Georgia Tech, and your willingness to just be here today to talk through design thinking. I think from everyone, we can agree that this was very much worthwhile and a lot of information that we can use going forward to develop our ideas. So thank you again for being our facilitator today.
Yeah, and just quickly, welcome to Georgia Tech. I mean, it's really great to find yourself in a place where everybody else is as passionate about learning and diversity and developing good ideas as you are, and we can do anything here. It's amazing to see how people come together and do incredible work, incredible research, but also develop incredible companies. And so, welcome, and hope to see you in the future. And if you just want to talk some more, you come see me in industrial design. We also, in industrial design, have a minor. So if you're curious about design thinking and how it can apply, even if you might be set on becoming a mechanical engineer, industrial design is a great minor for mechanical engineers. It's also and for other fields as well, like business. Even if you don't want to be a minor, you can still learn a lot from just rubbing elbows with other industrial designers on. But yeah, we're excited you're coming.
And right now, putting our next event in the chat. Here's the registration link. That event will be happening on July 6th at 1 p.m. And so I invite everyone on the call to actually join us, where we'll have different innovators like yourselves, and they're all part of the Create X program that Professor Chininis is also a part of. And you'll get to hear their experience at Georgia Tech and how they develop their ideas. So that's a fantastic thing to look forward to on July 6th. So please use that registration link to sign up, and we'll send you the Blue Jeans events information. So thank you again for everything, Professor Chininis, and just for being an awesome resource at Georgia Tech. We're going to stop the broadcast now, and we're going to close the event.
Bye.
Bye.